Okay, what we're finally going to do now is make a material for these handles and make them different than the wood because they're going to be like stainless steel. So let's take a look at how to create a material like that. I've taken the liberty and gone ahead of mapping, UVW mapping these hardware pieces. And also in the material, I set up a third material in our multi-sub object, which is here. So number 3, you can add a number there. And I did, and I added a Vray material with a diffuse map that has a checker map in it that is tiled 10 and 10 times. Okay, so I mapped it on there until the checkers look basically square, using cylindrical maps and then collapsing it down into edit poly again, like we did with the overall buffet furniture. So once that's mapped and once our material IDs are set up properly, these are set now to material ID number 3, each handle. Now we can go in and change that checker map. Since we see that they're mapped on there pretty correctly, we can now go in there and change the checker map to a bitmap by clicking on it and saying bitmap. Now, you would think that normally you might just want a solid material for the metal. We're going to go mostly solid, but we want to add a little variation because hardware always has fingerprints and those kind of things on it. It always gets kind of grease on it and different things like that. So we're not just going to go with a solid material. We're going to add tiny bits of variation. And what I'm going to do is just add that same grunge map that we used for the reflection on the console or on the wood material. And I'm going to apply that as a diffuse map here. Set it to blur 0. Take off real world scale. Let's make sure it shows. Okay, there it is. It's now mapping onto our metal handles. Okay, great. Now, what I'm going to do is, that's not what I don't want my metal to look that rustic. So what I'm going to do is set my color to what I would want my stainless steel metal handles to be, somewhere around there, because metal gets a lot of its color from its reflection actually. So you can put it to a kind of a dark diffuse. And then we'll still leave that map on there, but we'll just turn down its influence quite a bit, like maybe 10%. Okay, so now our metal looks like that. And that's fine. And you could go even lower because you don't really want to see that map. You just want to see, you want your eye to catch slight variations there. Where we can use it is in the reflection glossiness again. Let's put it there. And in the reflection, for a map like this, we want a ton of reflection. Because it's metal, a lot of its color just comes from the way it reflects light. So there we're turning up the reflection pretty high, but because of Fresnel effect, it's not really working how we want it. On a material like this, like chrome or stainless steel, you might be able to turn off Fresnel altogether so that it looks something like that. Now it's a little high though, I would say. So let's turn on Fresnel, unlock it, and then put it just to a very high number, like 6. Okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe even a little higher. And then maybe we could lighten this diffuse up a little bit to get some more of the lightness of that material from the actual diffuse. Yeah, turn that back down to 6. Okay, now our glossiness isn't looking right. There is some variation in it, which I like, but there's too much variation. So what we'll do there is turn down the influence of that map again. Yeah, now we're getting pretty close. 40, 30. Okay, that's about right. Actually, maybe even lower, slightly. I like something in between. We'll go with 25. Now, I'm thinking here that perhaps our Fresnel is a little too high. We have too much reflection going on. Maybe not. No, 6. We'll leave it there. Okay, and you can see how you could go back and forth on all this stuff. One thing we want to look at here, make sure again we are on microfacet GTR if you have the latest version of Vray. Okay, anisotropy we will adjust because this is a stainless steel material. So really would have brushing going on there. And that would cause the reflection to become kind of linear like that, to make it look more like a stainless steel so that the reflection spreads out in a linear fashion. And you can of course rotate that. Something like that. I think that's actually a really good material there. One other thing that I'd like to do here is add a little more darkness where, like for example, where this piece hits that piece. So again, we can go with the V-Ray dirt material. Probably not absolutely necessary here because it's going to be so small, so minute. But we will apply it once again, and I'm going to do it in the reflection channel, V-Ray dirt. We'll make it so that our normal color, which we already chose, is copied into our unoccluded. So everywhere where there's not an intersection, it will reflect like that. Everywhere where there is an intersection, it will reflect black, so it'll basically just show the diffuse color coming through. And we want, because this is such a small area, let's put it at like 2 inches, more like that. Now that was a little too simple. I mean, that would work as our metal, no doubt. Let's do a few other things to try and make it a little more complicated, a little more complex, to add more detail to it, just for the sake of learning. So let's go into the bump map here, and we'll put a noise map in here. We'll do some procedural stuff. Okay, the noise by default was going to look like that, which is 100% wrong. If we go to show end result and click it off, we'll see that now we're just looking at the map and it looks like this, which is totally wrong. So we can of course adjust the output here to make it have more contrast. Add points, add a point there and there, then just drag till we get a lot more contrast. This is just like putting a curves on in Photoshop. Okay, so we're pushing the whites more white and the blacks more black. Somewhere around there. We need to change the size quite a bit because it was huge. Usually around 0.25 is about what I do here, I think. 0.3. Turn the blur down. If you right click on that, it sets it to 0 essentially. Right click right there. Or type it in 0. It'll only let you go to 0.01. That's the lowest it'll go. Okay, and then here is where we can change the tiling. So if you change the tiling to 0.1, that's not the one we want. 0.1. Okay, you see that starts stretching. 0.001. Now we've got kind of a brushed material going on, right? There's our brushes. In the X, let's do it like 3 times, 4 times. Okay, now we just have straight vertical lines going on, which can act as a brushed metal texture. Okay, now when we show it on our handle, it's going kind of, I think, the wrong direction. I mean, there's no wrong or right here. You could do it like that, and then I think we'll want to tile it even more. And I take it back, let's go this way. And tile it less. Okay, so that'll get you a brushed material. And then let's look at what that's looking like in our material. You can see there, that's not really right. This is going to be a very, very small effect. The brushing is. So now you can see in that reflection, you can just see it's kind of scattering a little bit. Put it to 10, we can see it more. Okay, there. So let's get our map just right. Let's do the show end result and get in here and adjust this thing until it's right. 30, you go. I think what we need to do is just go way smaller on our size. Okay, the settings I ended up with are working okay. I've got it size 0.01, tiling 20, and this is at 0.001 or 0.01. Okay, it's having a hard time displaying here because it's so tiny. If I look on here, it looks like that. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a brushed look. I would say we want to make that very, very subtle. And I would also say that perhaps using the noise isn't the best. If we could find a nice bitmap with scratch metal, you could load it on there and make it even nicer. But I think for now, that handle's going to work very well for us. And it's not as simple always as just, especially if you were going to see this very big in your scene, you could really get some nice diffuse maps and things like that, nice grunge maps to put on here so that the metal is not just a solid reflection, because that really isn't right. The metal's not going to be perfectly polished all the time because people grab it there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as our material. And again, we just have it as a multi-sub-object material. That's our third ID, ID number 3 right there. So in my model, I changed all the handle elements to be ID number 3. And then that material just works. Our overall material is looking like this right now, which is great. Okay, I'm doing a quick render here of this metal, and that's what it's looking like. I think it looks very nice. And like I said, this is very small, but I showed you how to make a nice material that'll hold up under any circumstance. In this one, you hardly see it, so it could have been very basic and still work, but it's nice to know that if we made this bigger, put it closer up to the camera, it would still look good. But there it is, our furniture is coming together very nicely.